All righty. We're live.
We're live.
All right.
All right. So the prompt.
I can read the prompt.
All right, Ben, you got it.
All right. Please discuss with your group members situations in which you have employed the various sources of power and influence referenced by Hackman and Johnson. Work to tie those experiences to your role as a leader or as a follower. Finally, discuss ways in which cultural difference may influence the way we interact with leaders and employ power. I can start since I read it. Something I saw in the sources of power was on page 139 under reward power. And kind of like an experience back when one of my first jobs, I worked at UPS as a mail clerk, and we were kind of paid on piece rate, so we were really paid on the quality of our work and how fast we got the work done. So really, you kind of controlled your check, and we had a supervisor who, but I think he was really power hungry. Really abused his power, especially because he didn't really have any power, but he only had reward power. And so he really watched over us, I think, a little too much. And I think that caused a lot of people to create errors in their work, because he knew that with each error we made, it was a dock and pay. And after a certain amount of errors, you can get fired. So he really took that pretty seriously, and you could tell he took pride in it. So it was a really hard work environment to work with. But so I think it's just one of those sources of power that I think he just kind of abused, I think, a little bit too much.
I think it's interesting that you talked about reward power, but like in a negative way. Because I think when a lot of people think of reward power, yeah, you think of it as like a positive, but that's a really interesting situation, actually.
Yeah, I hate it.
Yeah, that's horrible. Yeah, so I talked about reward power too, but on the opposite end of it, where I actually talked about how I use it in two different ways. So for like my associates, I use it a lot. I bribe them with like prizes and lunch and coffee, and I leave it up to them, because I mean, any reward has to be something that they're actually desiring. So I let them decide what those prizes are that's going to motivate them. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I use it with like my other managers. I use it more as like a warmth and supportiveness, because I've been there the longest. So I'm there as like their support system to help them wherever I can. So that's kind of how I talked about the two different aspects of reward within my own job.
Yeah, reward with my job as well. I do like this door-to-door sales job. So basically it's a reward system. You get what you put in, you get, all that stuff. So like with the reward system for my job, he'll do like $50 spiffs if you get an individual to sign up for a quote, because it is sales. So it is kind of like a reward system, and it just keeps it competitive within like the group.
I guess I'll go next. It's actually kind of funny because it's the opposite at my job, where we are supposed to have a reward system. Like the company encourages it, but we just don't really do anything. Like for MVP is what we call it for every month, like our employee of the month. They used to do it where it was like an allotment where you could get like T-shirts, whatever. Now it just kind of turned into like a picture on the wall, and like that's about it. And it almost like you could tell that like getting MVP is just kind of like, like no one really cares. It's just like, oh, cool, I got it. It doesn't really do its job. And like, we've been trying to like figure out how we can like revitalize it. But our store manager is just kind of, he doesn't really care, because he cares about like that end result instead of thinking about the day-to-day work that gets to that end result. So.
Besides reward power, I want to mention that over the summer when I was working at the admissions office at a public high school, actually a private high school, I kind of experienced expert power, because I'm basically doing the dirty work, all their busy work, all that kind of stuff. So I reference expert power because you know, I'm working right underneath the not the athletic, the mission director, and you know they're experts at this. She used to work at Princeton University, was an admissions officer there, so she's an expert at this. So I was learning from the best, and yeah, I was doing her dirty work, but I was gaining knowledge through her expertise. So there's that, and I also want to reference referent power on page 141. Basically, it's a power of being a role model and how you can influence others. I think for me, as a follower, when I was a swimmer, just growing up, I'll look at all these, you know, when I was in middle school swimming and I see all these high school swimmers, right? They have such an influence on like the younger swimmers, especially when you're on the same swim team. I know it's kind of like it's not like a job, but I think in all aspects, even in sports, you see that a lot, that just because they're older and they have, they define themselves in the sport, they kind of have the referent power.
I like that you brought it up in a different aspect than work, because I know sometimes we all focus on work, but like you were saying, like sports is another way where we can see different types of leadership. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be within a job. So I'm glad you brought up that example.
Thanks.
Yeah, actually, that is when I'm thinking about like sports, having the ability to like ask someone who's been in a system longer, because I'm more of like a team sport when I played hockey. Having someone who's been in a system longer or played for a certain coach longer is a great leadership, because it's someone to like, hey, like I can like ask you instead of being that guy like, oh, I don't know what's going on, coach, you know, because sometimes that could be intimidating. But asking like a teammate, it kind of makes it a little bit more acceptable.
Oh, definitely. That's why you, at least for me as a freshman, you automatically just go to the senior captain, just because he's been there a while. He's chosen for a reason to represent the team as a team captain. So, so if anything, being a team captain in a sport kind of role has that role model.
On a different power, we haven't talked about it yet. My work uses a lot of information power. When we have like new drinks coming out and stuff, if we don't hand that information down, like it's something that could be hurtful to people that are working that day when those drinks launch and they don't know how to make those drinks, and just new information available, if we don't communicate it down, it could be detrimental to the team.
Yeah, definitely. Should we talk about the culture aspect of our question now?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Unless anyone has anything else to add. I don't think so, though.
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think touched on everything.
Cool. So who wants to go ahead and discuss the culture aspect?
Well, I think I'll start. I mean, I think culture has really everything to how we use power. I mean, last semester in summer, I took a diversity and organizations class, and in it, it talked about how to be an effective leader, you have to be able to understand how to use your culture, but how to also understand other people's cultures. And so I think, like under here, reward power, one of the key benefits is culturally sanctioned. So, like I said, I think that my boss in that situation at UPS, Tyler was his name, you know, he was just a really quiet guy. And so understanding more culture now, I can look back and see, like, you know, he was probably influenced to be the way that he is. And I think the way that he's been brought up with culture and his culture and his subculture, I think has determined like how he viewed his role to like use that power in a negative way, because it wasn't necessarily that he was kind of being like a a shark in a way. It was just he was a guy who just kind of stuck to himself. He was a perfectionist, and you can just tell that that's how he was brought up. And I think he wanted all of us to be like that. And it just, I know I feel like I'm rambling, but it just kind of felt like it was just a hard work environment to be like, because it was hard to kind of see eye to eye to him.
It's
Yeah.
pretty unique.
Like I ranted, my bad.
No, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. With my manager now, he's technically the team leader, and he's my age. He's from a different country, but you can definitely just tell that subcultures and just the way he does things, it's different from where he came from, and he just wants you to do the same as well. So like the team leader is different from the manager. He kind of had like the control like freak a little bit, and then once you warmed up to him and found out where he was from, then you could adapt to his culture.
Yeah. I took a class last session, I think. I don't know if you guys have taken it. I think it was international business communication. And we had to sign into this site called GlobeSmart. And it actually goes into each country and then the business kind of like norms within that culture. And it compares it on a scale compared to like our own culture. I actually think it's something that's pretty useful if you are working with other people, because like you guys have talked about, even though, I mean, that you said that guy Tyler, he was from here, but at the same time, he clearly grew up in like some sort of different culture. And if you don't adapt that to different people that you're working with, then you're not going to have a successful communication within your team. Because I mean, there's such like, there's low context versus high context. Like there's the smallest things can drastically get in the way of communication with another individual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Because actually, Ben, to kind of piggyback what you said a little bit, it's culture doesn't have to be like race or ethnicity or anything like that. It's also like upbringing, and just the way like the norms for like that culture in the family raises someone. Because somewhat, like for me personally, like everyone I deal with is American, but like the way that they were, like their ethnicity is obviously different, but the way that they were brought up is so different that certain tactics or communication styles that I have that like seem normal to me are completely can be interpreted like aggressive or rude by being like direct, because that was like the culture I was raised in. So I thought it was interesting that it's not just ethnicity or race or anything like that. Like for you, Colin, where it was like a different nationality, or like they were raised in a different country, but even in the United States, like we do have different cultures and like norms that we grow up with.
Hey, Marcus, you took the words out of my mouth. But 100% agree with you there, man. About it's not about race, it's not about ethnicity. It's about where you came from, where you grew up. You know, I'm part of a swim team where there's a lot of international athletes. And for example, like, not necessarily a leadership position. He was one of my teammates last year. This guy's from France. And he just approached things differently, right? He just, very passive aggressive guy. If he could do it by himself, he will. Not very team-oriented, not very team-motivated, but he just shows it within his own personal actions, which is great at sometimes. But we all know, like we discussed last week, that we respond better to a democratic leadership, right? And so I think that's where we kind of butt heads with myself and a couple of my teammates with this French guy, because we didn't really meet eye to eye. Something like you mentioned, Ben. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed, I feel like this kind of question relates back to that discussion board about, what was it, like on page 97, like being a paternalistic leader.
Mm.
And it says right here, you know, there's certain countries actually that researchers have noticed that in Turkey, Malaysia, Japan, China, they realized that in those countries, paternalistic leadership practices increase organizational commitment levels. So, like I said, it's all based off of where you come from and that kind of background you're coming from.
I definitely agree with Patrick and Marcus on that. I'm going to keep mine short because we did just go over our 15-minute mark. Sorry,
Nice.
I guess I should have put it in. I definitely agree with Patrick and Marcus. It's not based off of like your age or race or your gender. It's definitely based off of like how you were raised. I think my manager does a lot of when he's hiring, he kind of makes sure it fits into our culture at the store. He doesn't want someone who's not going to be able to mesh well into the culture, that won't follow his leadership style and get us where we need to be. Does anybody else have anything to add?
No.
Those are all good points. Good discussion.
Yeah, that was a great discussion.
All right. That was a lot easier this time.
Yeah. Oh my God. So
Yeah,
much
now I
easier.
finally got it down, so I'll be ready. Finally.